Hello and welcome back to Arts Talk, a series of talks that I'm having. I'm Stephen Barker. I'm the Dean of the Claire Trevor School of the Arts. A series of talks with faculty and students from the school to lay out for the rest of the world some of the really remarkable work that's going on in the Claire Trevor School of the Arts right now in general, and of course also during the crazy year that we have just completed and that is ongoing. And so we've done a series of talks. It happens with the four chairs of the four departments in the Claire Trevor School of the Arts: art, dance, drama, and music. We're finishing up with a couple of talks with graduate students in the music department, having had a talk with Stephen Tucker, the chair of the music department, some time ago. Of course, all of those previous talks are archived on the School of the Arts website, available if you want to have the opportunity to hear them. And so today we're talking to Joao Martins, who is a doctoral student in the music department in the Claire Trevor School of the Arts, a truly interdisciplinary scholar, performer. And so one of the things that we're going to be exploring today with Joao is just how that notion of interdisciplinarity is working out for him as a performer stroke scholar, something about his amazing history and where he intends to go from here. So Joao Martins, welcome to Arts Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have a chance to have a chat with you. You've actually been in the Claire Trevor School of the Arts for a while. So before we actually go back into your amazing history as an academic and a student, say something about your time here at UC Irvine.
It's been really incredible. It's not only in the music department, where I've been working with Professor Skolnik and Professor Kagi and closely with Dr. Grimes, but also that I've had the access to the dance department through Professor Teresiano, where I got to accompany for dance classes for the dance department. And then even outside of the Claire Trevor School, where I've worked with faculty in the history department, specifically Dr. Rachel O'Toole. So it's been a really incredible experience in terms of the access I've had to people who have just amazing knowledge.
And so what brought you to UCI? How did you get here?
So I was living in New York. I lived there for several years, and I was feeling like I was getting to a point in my career slash research where I needed some sort of institutional support for what I wanted to do. And so I looked into a number of programs, and then, from the choices I had, this just made so much sense because of the faculty that was here.
Well, you had some amazing backgrounds to offer any institution that brought you into its higher education courses. They actually began with your work in Portugal. You are
Hmm.
Portuguese.
Hmm.
Um, were you born and brought up in Coimbra in Portugal?
For the most part, yes. For a brief period of time, we lived in Berlin because my parents were teaching there for a brief period, but then most of the time in Portugal, yeah.
The Coimbra is a city right in the middle of Portugal, right between
Hmm.
Porto in the north and Lisbon in the south. It's an interior city. It's not altogether natural that you would find yourself really a citizen of the world, as you certainly have been, Joao. Obviously, having parents and teachers and moving through Europe was amazing. But now you got your BA, believe it or not, in English and French literature from
Hmm.
your, as it were, home university. What was it that interested you in that? Just an interest in international languages and literatures?
To an extent, yes. I was always a huge fan of reading. I did a lot of reading as a kid and as a teenager. Um, and for some reason, I always just really liked languages. I have a sort of an ease with learning languages. So I was speaking English and French pretty early on. And it just sort of made sense to continue into that at a college level.
When you went to Berlin, did you pick up some German as well?
It's possible that it's somewhere in my subconscious. I was too young to remember anything.
Very, very sensible, I think. English, French, and Portuguese, etc. That'll do for a start. But then you came to the United States to get your Bachelor of Music degree at Berklee College of Music. How did
Mhm.
that happen? I assume you were already performing at that time, or playing piano and doing percussion and those things from early on.
Yeah, and what happened was I had moved to the Netherlands uh, to work as a translator originally, and
Hmm.
then just started getting more and more work as a musician. And at a given point, I just sort of thought, okay, I can do a number of things, but I'm missing in like a serious, grounded education in music. And so, sort of on a whim, I decided to apply for Berkeley. Not sure whether I'd get in or even if I could afford it. And then it did happen that I got in and that I had a fairly decent scholarship. So it just kind of made sense to really make that happen.
But now this is following your MA in
Hmm.
history from
Hmm.
Amsterdam.
That's
So,
correct. Yeah.
in other words, as you've migrated through the world, you just kept picking up degrees as you went, in other words.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
Right. Well, we're delighted that you migrated west from Berkeley College, because obviously that multiple kinds of training preparation brought you to California, to
Hmm.
UCI, and to the M.F.A degree in musicology here at the Trevor School of the Arts. Did you come to work with Nina or with any particular one of the faculty?
I wasn't necessarily aiming for one single person. I was mostly interested in the strength of the faculty in general. I knew that I was coming to a program that was more scholarly oriented, but at the same time, it was a school that had a very strong improvisation component in the ICIT program. So I was excited about the idea that I wasn't just limited to scholarly research, but I'd be able to be uh, taught and be guided by people who were experts in other areas also.
It is really a remarkable music department. I frankly don't know another one like it, with really three major areas of study: the as it were purely academic doctoral program in musicology, music history and theory, the performative side with really amazing performers like Keakagi, like Nina Skolnik, Lorna Griffiths, etc., and also this remarkable, unique doctorate in integrated composition, improvisation, and technology, which is a doctoral degree like no other in the world. And so you're really taking advantage of all three of those aspects of this really unique music program. I do have to ask you, since your two main advisors are Nina Skolnik, who's a great pianist, and Nicole Grimes, who is a fabulous music scholar, are they both just absolutely 100% on board with this mix of things that you're doing, or are you kind of playing them off one against the other? That's a
No,
joke.
actually, no, I got that. Yeah. No, it's actually, no, it's been incredible. They've both been incredibly supportive. I think they both also, to a large degree, understand that a great deal of the future of musicology and of music research is a combination of scholarly and performance. And I think that's a trend we've been seeing already for a few years, not just in the States, but especially in Europe. So they're very, very supportive of that whole concept.
It's really a fantastic kind of memory moment. The School of the Arts at UCI was founded in the mid '60s with the idea that it would be the conservatory within the academy, and that it would offer both sides of that, the obligations of a major public research university with a great school of performance and the arts. And all four of the departments in the School of the Arts have tried to live up to that. Music department, very much a part of that. And you are just really an incredible embodiment of that notion of working across various disciplines. So having gone from the M.F.A. in musicology into this brand new doctoral program, it's really only a couple of years old. You're part of, I think, the initial class or very close to it in this doctoral program. What was it that motivated you to think, okay, I'm going to go ahead and get this PhD? I've got so many degrees already, and I'm already essentially working as a performer. What was it about the PhD that particularly attracted you?
Well, two things I would say. One, the fact that I could continue working with the people that I've been working with. So Professor Skolnik, Professor Akagi, Dr. Grimes, just, knowing that I could just pursue that research and that work in performance that I had been doing up until now and not have to have a break and sort of restart and redefine with other people. And also, I knew that I was getting some of the greatest uh, education and the greatest support you could find, really. Professor Skolnick, Professor Kagi, Dr. Grimes, they're all geniuses in their own field. So to have access to that is just absolutely incredible. And then the other side of it was actually the fact that it is a brand new PhD and that the department was very willing to accommodate the combination of scholarly research and performance, that they were excited about the fact that we could tailor it to that sort of pursuit was also part of it. So I think some programs that, and I'm obviously not trying to dismiss other PhD programs, but I'm saying that other programs might be a little more established, so they're a little more on a track, and you don't get to choose necessarily how you want to shape it. And here I thought there was more of that possibility because of the fact that it is a brand new program.
Exactly. And once again, you are the perfect candidate to be in it. The School of the Arts actually has 3 doctoral programs, 1 in drama and 2 in the music department. And all 3 of them are what I call boutique programs. That is to say, chosen faculty, in this case for you, Nina Skolnik and Nicole Grimes, with others involved, work with a doctoral student, i.e. you, to actually, in a sense, make a unique doctoral program. Nobody else is doing the same doctoral program you're doing. Nobody could do the same one you're doing, but it really is uniquely designed for your interests, your background, where you want to take it. It's a really remarkable thing that's only appropriate for certain kinds of students. If you want a traditional PhD, you probably don't want to come to our program because people are going to keep asking you, well, what are your interests? What do you want to do? What do you want to develop? And it takes a particular kind of person to do that. For example, in your case, your main area of interest is traditional Brazilian music, not European, not Portuguese, not American. So I know you've spent time in Brazil. How did the interest, other than the language history, how did the interest in Brazil rise to the top for you?
I think a number of things. First of all, I have some family in Brazil, so there's always been that connection. And also, my parents are huge fans of the 60s, 70s MPB, phase of Brazilian music. So I grew up listening to a lot of Chico Buarque and those sorts of artists. So I think it was just a normal, just sort of natural thing for me to become interested in that. And then actually in Amsterdam, I ended up, becoming friends with a lot of Brazilian musicians, started playing a lot of Brazilian music. And that just sort of developed from there to the point where, I had to go live in Brazil to study there, to feel like I was learning from the original source. And then just sort of developed that way, I think.
So you are actually an instrumentalist. Your interest in music is in performing as well as studying. What instruments do you actually play?
Well, so I'd say my main instrument is the piano. That's what I devote the most time to. Um, but I'm also, I've spent a lot of time studying Brazilian hand percussion. So I play a lot of the small percussion instruments of Brazilian music. And, I dabble in, I think every musician dabbles a little in guitar, but that's more like a hobby almost type thing.
Right.
So yeah, so piano and percussion are really my main two.
Okay. Is that how those are the instruments that are generally the most common instruments in accompanying dance work? Is that how you and Alan Teresiano got together through your work in the various instruments you do to work with him in the dance department?
Yeah, to an extent, yes. We actually originally met because I took a class that he teaches in the dance department. It's called Musical Resources. At the time, I wanted to take a few things in within the Claire Trevor School, but in other departments to sort of broaden my scholarly understanding of a number of things. So I took his class, and he's an incredible accompanist. So he was demonstrating some things on the piano, and I had one of my percussion instruments called a pandeiro with me, and I asked if I could sit in with him, basically. And from there, it just synced up so well that he said, "Oh, why don't you come and play with me for the classes that I accompany?"
Fantastic. Really a great opportunity actually for the dancers as well. Alan Teresiano is officially in the dance department, but is a composer, pianist, and musician who often teaches and works in the music department. In fact, the largest single class that's taught in the Claire Trevor School of the Arts is a summer course that Alan Teresiano teaches with over 800 students in it. It's really a sort of an here's music course. And so this crossover with Alan is just a wonderful opportunity for students to get a chance to work with you. So I'm fascinated by the way in which you're putting your dissertation, which is actually a proper PhD dissertation, together that contains a performative element as well as the more traditional academic elements. How are you combining these two sides of the potential doctoral work?
Yeah, so the figuring that out is a work in progress for sure. But I think what's been successful in my case is that I've been able to, through the performance, whenever I'm analyzing and I'm researching elements of what I want to discuss, the performance lets me understand things at a deeper level than if I was just observing as an outsider. That has been my experience. And then, not just connected to the dissertation, but, all the other elements of academic life. Whenever I do presentations, whenever I give papers at conferences, that lets me either demonstrate or be able to explain more thoroughly what's happening in the music when I do that sort of thing. And the great thing about that is that if people seem to really respond really well to real live demonstrations of what I'm discussing, rather than just sort of like a more abstract, notated type of way of transmitting that information.
Right. No, absolutely. It's an incredible opportunity for readers, et cetera, et cetera. Do you plan to actually have that kind of, I guess I would say, multimedia element in the final version of your dissertation? I ask because across the world now, it's increasingly possible to do a PhD dissertation that's not simply couple of hundred pages of paper, but also then contains the possibilities of performative elements as well. Is that something you're looking into?
Yeah, absolutely. I think actually that sort of, as you've mentioned, that's sort of the future of scholarly research in the arts in general, but especially in music. And especially if you're discussing things like Brazilian music that has so many nuances of rhythm and nuances of interaction between players, it's so much more efficient to have an actual audiovisual component to demonstrate what you're researching or explaining rather than trying to get people to imagine it just from looking at music notation on the page. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's definitely the future of presenting research.
It'll be very exciting to see that final product. I'm just delighted to hear what you're doing. It's the very best of what I think are the cross-disciplinary opportunities that we have. So I want to thank you, Joao Martins, for an absolutely fascinating insight into what you're doing, what's happening in the music department. We're reaching near the end of a year-long investigation of the most interesting and provocative facets of the Claire Trevor School of the Arts. This has certainly been one of them. So, Joao, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Thanks for sharing your amazing expertise and what you're doing. We look forward to the outcome of this doctoral work and wish you all the very best for your future. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
And today we're going to be talking to Omar Costa Hamido, who is also in the ICIT program in the music department. You could say that what we're doing is to continue our Let's Talk to Portuguese Artists Week, because both Omar and Joao have come to us from Portugal. Omar did his M.F.A work in Portugal before coming to the United States. Omar, welcome to our Arts Talk session.
Dear Stephen, Parker, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here. And yes, thank you. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
I think we had our first conversation on one of the first days you were here. It was a wonderfully stimulating conversation that I had intended to follow up on immediately. And now here we are, a couple of years later, actually able to talk, although our paths fortunately have crossed a number of times during your time in the program. Let's go back in history a little bit and look into some of the work that you did as an M.F.A student in Portugal before coming to the United States. The work you did in the M.F.A program, which is led directly, I think, to what you're doing here, was actually involving music and painting. Say something about how that master's work actually interested you, who you were working on, and what led you to that combination.
Yes, so I was doing my master's in music theory and composition in Portugal between 2011 and 2013-14. And the focus of my research there was on the relation between music and painting and compositional processes. So the reason why I did that is because I've always been interested in the visual arts. Actually, I was about to go to architecture school when I first decided to. Then no, it's music that I need to pursue. I was both studying visual arts in high school and music at the music conservatory, and but then I decided when I went to the university, I decided to pursue jazz saxophone, studying jazz saxophone. I did my BA in music jazz, but when I finished my BA, I felt the need to acquire some other skills, some other perspective into music, namely with electroacoustic and composition. And also to bring some of my other interests in visual arts, and that's how I got to do this master's and this research. I was also very much influenced by the theoretical and the artistic work of the painter Vasily Kandinsky, the father of abstract art. And specifically, the first of his theoretical works on the spiritual in art has had a very deep and lasting impact on me, and the way I even started thinking about art after that. There's like a before that and after that. And so I started doing much more multimedia works and involving different kinds of technology, and doing taking a different approach to the act of composing and performing. And so during my research, I was trying to see the relations between the mediums of these two artistic means of expression, music and painting. And to do that, I focused on the material means for these two, for music and painting, as sound and image. And I tried I read a lot of things, and unfortunately there isn't one simple way to say this piece of music equals this piece of painting. And so what I did was to try to deconstruct the material means of these artistic expressions, and that's where I started quote unquote diving into the subatomic particles of the fabric of reality. And my my I guess my big question, my big quest in life is trying to understand reality and these things that we use, and what is our role with it. And I think that informed everything that came after. So that's the kind of work that I started doing there.
It's really a fascinating trajectory, Omar. One of the things that occurs to me is that given your early interest in architectural theory and application, clearly the work that you are doing and have done in music and in painting, particularly studying Kandinsky, is the whole notion of formal structures, the idea of form itself. Architecture ties music and painting together in terms of its fundamental interest in formal structure and the way in which structures, whether they are kinetic structures or static, non-moving structures, are actually defined with regard to their dynamics and the way they then move in time. And one of the most fascinating aspects of what you're talking about, which I can't wait to get into with you, is the way in which, at least in the architecture of the relationship between art and music in the 20th century since Einstein, is the unification of the static and the kinetic in the notion of space-time, and the way in which formal structures relate to both areas that you worked on back then. So I'm sure that the Kandinsky work that you did has led you to the study in formal structures with regard, for example, to jazz composition. How do you think about the whole compositional element of what you're doing? You talked about your interest in, what did you call it in your M.F.A work? It wasn't just composition, it was compositional something. What's the second word?
Music theory and composition.
Music theory and composition.
Yes.
And so the compositional element, which of course in music has to do with formal structures that occur in time, which is a particularly interesting notion given the fact that jazz makes use of both formal structures and of course also improvisation. And so I assume that this is something that you were working on from the very beginning of your musical experience in Portugal. So I have to ask you, what brought you not only to the United States, but to the ICIT program here at UCI?
Definitely. And just to follow up on what you just said, definitely the formal structures were a big part of what I was working on. In fact, that's what I ended up doing with the process of deconstructing the material means. The goal was not to compare the final existing sound and the final existing image, but something that exists before we actually have sound and image. And at that point, we can not only relate music and painting, but they can actually be the same thing, this compositional idea, this formal structure. Right. And so I was really fascinated about this, and I was thinking about this and the implications of this for a couple of years. I finished in 2013-14, and I only started the PhD program here in fall 2017. In those 3 years of break, I was mostly thinking and about my role as an artist and as a person. And there was all these existential questions that I was thinking about, and I was really into. That's when I started really getting interested in philosophy and reading old philosophers and newer philosophers as well. There was one that that really helped me start making sense of things that I hold very, very dearly. Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard, and is like, because he's just a gifted writer, and it was such a pleasure to have found his writings and reading. I remember sitting on my porch and reading Kierkegaard, and it was a really important moment. So I knew that I from very early on, I knew that I wanted to pursue continue research into a PhD, but I needed I needed to go someplace where they would let me do this multimedia work involving technology, um, both study composition and performance, including for improvisation. And when I started looking for programs, there aren't actually many programs in the world that can integrate all these different components at the same level in equal ways. And so, yes, I looked for various different programs, and I also applied for various different things, including to Fulbright in late 2015. Yes, late 2015, yes. And actually, that's I was really fortunate. That was a very long process. So I started preparing my PhD application in 2015, and I only started my PhD in fall 2017. And I was really fortunate to be selected for the Fulbright, and that's what helped me greatly in being able to actually come to the United States to pursue this degree. And then the reason to choose UCI, there were several. First and foremost, the program. They have a very unique program here called ICIT, which stands for Integrated Composition, Improvisation, and Technology. So a program for performer composers who use technology and think critically about the integration of these. And also other reasons that included the fact that it was in a school of in a music department, but in the context of a school of arts, where there are other departments, art, dance, and drama, besides music. And I wanted to be in a place where I would be able to interact with other artists. That was such an important thing for me. But also the fact that it's in a university setting with other schools as well. So the computer science, the mathematics, and I also wanted to, and philosophy, I wish I had engaged a little bit more, but I also wanted to be in a vivid environment and with different people to be able to interact with people thinking differently about reality. So that had a big role, and of course the faculty that were here in specifically in my program. I'll highlight Michael Dessen, who's from the start I knew I wanted to ask him to be my advisor, and he's currently my dissertation advisor. Michael is a very also multimedia and multi-skilled musician and professional and academic. He works a lot with improvisation and with technology, and it has been a key person in recent times due to his unique skills in the world of telematics. He's been one of the major contributors online and in person for allowing us to be able to connect in the current times. But I should also mention this. At the time, I found this only after I applied to UCI. In March 2017, at least I was able to figure out that it was released in March 2017. I probably only heard about it a couple months after. there was this video on the arts UCI arts department page with an interview with the vice provost Michael Dennin with you, and in it there is a moment where you talk about the citizen artist. And I saw that you also mentioned that last week with the share Stephen Tucker. You mentioned and I'm going to quote you. We are interested in preparing what I would call citizen artists, people who are sophisticated thinkers, sophisticated critiquers of public culture and society, as well as consummate performers and artists. It's a very high calling for the school. And this idea of citizen artist was actually literally an idea that I was dealing with in my period of thinking about philosophy. And I actually wrote this expression of the citizen artist in my personal statement that I used to apply to UCI, which is a really interesting coincidence.
Let me just quickly say that one of the incredible strengths of this unique doctoral program of which you are a part, this notion of integrating these various elements ranging all the way from improvisation, which is a wonderful marriage of form and free form, as it were, with deep research into the various kinds of genres and forms of technology, as well as live performance. It really is, for me, it is probably the quintessential doctoral program in the sense that it marries research, performance, deep thinking, and ethical responsibility within the context of culture in ways that are really virtually unique. I don't think that I know of no other program that does this. And so obviously, I'm delighted that you were attracted to this program. And other students in the program, as I've said, we talked to Joao Martins last week about this. He'll be appearing with you in this interview once it appears on the website. You're two absolutely wonderful examples of the way in which this deep consideration, not just of manifestation of the arts and culture, but the reasons for doing it and the way in which arts manifest the finest research into the way in which we live our lives and the maximizing of the best qualities of that lived life, taking an ethical dimension that you read in Kierkegaard, the spiritual dimension that comes from Kandinsky, et cetera. I mean, what you do is to bring together just really wonderful depths of thought about the way in which these various elements of the research into art and life actually work. And so one of the ways in which you've already mentioned, Omar, that's worked for you is to delve down really beyond the levels of the macro, the experience that we all have in the world of things, down to the micro, the nano world, in terms of your work with quantum mechanics and quantum computing. How has your research into this really atomic and subatomic level actually influenced your work as an artist? I know that you've done really amazing research into the relationship between quantum computing and music. Most people who are listening to this interview won't really, I think, know what that means. Can you give just a bit of a very brief primer into what you actually are looking into here?
Yes, thank you. So this research that I'm pursuing right now on music and quantum computing is a development of what I set in motion with my work with music and painting. But if I was only talking metaphorically about the subatomic level of the material means of artistic expression back then, now I'm kind of trying to go a little bit more towards the real physicality of it. Having that said, I'm not actually deconstructing and playing with phonons and photons. What I'm doing right now is working with quantum computing, which is a different way to to do computation. It's a different paradigm altogether, and it's an emerging technology. And me as a technology, I'm super excited about it. And I decided to study it and to try to integrate it into my creative practice.
And how are you doing that?
Yes. So I'm doing that by studying how quantum computing works and how these frameworks actually work. And that has included, it turns out one of the best ways to know how quantum computing works is to actually simulate one, create a simulator. So I've also built a simulation of quantum computing, and I'm developing devices that work with my electroacoustic setup um, in various different ways. Um, they sometimes I use them, and so I program them as I would program a quantum computer, which is by building quantum circuits. And these quantum circuits, they run as if they would run on a real machine, which is a probabilistic means of computation. So the way it works is that you have a circuit, a set of instructions, and then the processor, the computer will run it multiple times, and then the average of those results, they will average the result that you want. But it's not gonna just give the solution in one go, because you want to work with a state that it's unique to quantum computing, which is the superposition state. And in that state, it's is in multiple positions, as the name implies. And so when you measure it, you can still have sometimes one state or another, but if you build your circuit in certain way, you can push the results towards the goal that you want to achieve. But current machines, they're still prone to noise. And this is why we are in this NISQ era, noisy intermediate scale quantum computing era. And so the results sometimes they include some results that you don't want. They're the incorrect answer, but mostly they'll give you the correct answer. So this idea of a probabilistic method of computation and having some error is actually very interesting, compositionally speaking. It gives the possibility to use all these outputs, really both the correct answer and the incorrect answer, as both a version and a variation of something. And so I'm using this idea to control what section of a piece I'll go next, or control a parameter on a audio effect, or even design new sounds altogether for a synthesizer.
It occurs to me that the whole notion of superposition and the way in which probabilistic probabilities work with regard to superpositions really is a very interesting potential union of quantum computing and jazz. I mean, there's a way in which the whole notion of the relationship between what in jazz you would call improvisation and what in quantum computing you would call probability or superposition, there's a wonderful potential relationship between them, it seems. Am I completely wrong in that?
No, there's definitely there's a relation there, and I would say it's also in the fact that you have to deal with these unexpected results, and in jazz you have that all the time. You need to quickly react to something and know how to deal and make the best out of it. So yeah, there's an interesting connection here to be explored, definitely.
Well, and to be a little practical about that, I know that you are currently preparing your thesis presentation, which is going to be done, I believe, this spring in our experimental performance laboratory, which is the perfect place to have it done. It's doubly interesting because, of course, we are still in a very, very limited capacity to be on campus. Say something, Omar, about the way in which you're preparing to do your thesis presentation in the XMPL.
Okay, so my thesis recital, my dissertation recital is going to be recorded. There's no audience because there's no audience allowed in the space. So I decided to record it. But also to be extra safe, I'm recording each piece individually and not the whole concert in one go. That allows me to have the least amount of people in the space at any time. And because I'm going to be doing that, I also decided to team up with Grant Spice, the cinematographer, that he's also here now a graduate student here at the art department, in the art department. And so we're kind of going to be exploring ways to make it more as a movie, and think of some transitions and spend some time into making it more of a less of a traditional recital that seen from one perspective, one point of view, but having time to go around and try different things. So yeah, there will be 4 main pieces. One is a telematic piece that I just recorded yesterday, with Will Vinson playing saxophone. Is like one of my top favorite saxophone players in the world, and there was this opportunity among the chaos that the world is in right now. He's a great musician, a jazz improviser from New York, and when the pandemic hit, he had to leave, and he's currently in Australia. And so, and then musicians all around the world, they stopped getting gigs because they couldn't play in person. So there was like this small window of opportunity for me to be able to collaborate with him and invite him to play on this telematic piece. And so I had Will Vinson and Tina Raymond, the drummer, who's the director of jazz studies at California State University, the first woman on holding this position, a brilliant drummer. They played amazingly. It's all I can say. And so now, so that's one piece where I connected them telematically, and so they're playing with each other with some manageable latency because it's 2 entirely different continents. And there's some processing going on at some point in the piece. So I'm also not just using this telematic connection as a replacement of doing the same thing they would do as if they were in person, but adding something to it and creating like this new space in the internet.
Fantastic. Is there a date for the final presentation yet for the thesis performance?
To publish this recording?
Yes.
There's no
when
fixed
it will be available to us.
There's no fixed date yet, but by the summer I want to release it.
Okay, so we'll certainly have that prominent on the website. Those of you watching and listening, please pay attention to this really unique piece coming out. You undoubtedly know out there that doctoral dissertations and theses are wildly various in this new age in which all kinds of limitations have led, just as Omar is saying, to amazing new kinds of options for things that in the normal course of things we simply wouldn't do, but that are actually expanding the possibilities for putting together these kinds of transitional documents, as it were, for the kinds of research that can be ongoing. Clearly, this is just a stage in an incredibly complex and rich area that you're exploring, Omar. So after this thesis and after you finish your degree here, I know you're going to be continuing to pursue these very, very rich interests that are changing virtually overnight as computing changes, as the whole notion of what computing actually means changes, and as we move further and further into the quantum world. What do you see yourself doing after UCI? Do you have plans for how you want to continue this work, what the context will be, where you would see yourself landing after you're finished at UCI?
That's a toughest question. I'm not sure what the future holds. The immediate future will probably most likely include continuing this work and making sure that it's accessible to other people to also try it out and continue this work on this as well. But most likely, the most likely immediate future will be collaborating with some of the other people that I've come to know that are also interested in this. And yeah, I will continue exploring being an artist researcher and a citizen artist and working with multimedia and emerging technology, wherever that will take me. I believe that's the best answer that I can give.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's just a remarkably rich and deep vein that you're tapping into, and it's going to be fascinating to see how you keep this notion of being a responsible artist in an ongoing world in which the whole notion of the citizen artist is so rapidly changing, and the whole notion of art is rapidly changing, not only as new genres and technologies emerge, but as the whole shape of the world of interaction actually undergoes these extremely rapid evolutionary steps as we move through and then out of this pandemic into whatever is going to be following it in the years to come. Omar Hamido, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dean Parker. My pleasure.